Okay, cool, thank you. The next thing about the grant is I just want to let you know, we have some funds left in the outreach line. And I've spoken with several of our ADLN team members, and we believe that branding and education are missing from our outreach strategy. So we're excited to hire a graphic designer to create a small set of infographics that will help educate residents on issues of housing affordability and also help us spread awareness of the different initiatives we're doing and provide residents more chances to get involved. So we advertise this position on different social media and LinkedIn and the city website, and we got four applications. 3 were really good. They were local residents. So out of those 3, 1 was a little out of our price range, but the other 2 are within the price range. So I've been interviewing them to go through kind of their experience and their portfolio, and I'll be making a decision about that this week. And so I just want to let you know that that invoice will be coming up in April. So that's already within the outreach line item of the grant. And then this will just help us kind of reach more people and do some more education about what housing affordability is, because there's lots of ideas and thoughts on that floating around. Next item, we had discussed how previously discussed how Hudson Roots had some leftover funds. So our contract with St. Catherine's, who was the original administrator, that concluded at the end of December. And they're invoicing like lags by month. So we're finally caught up. And basically we have $9,000 left in that line item. And so it doesn't really quite make sense to use that with St. Catherine's, just because they kind of cost a certain amount of admin to execute the program, which made sense when we were dispersing, $30,000 a month. But if we only have 9,000, we don't want to spend it all on admin. So we've looked at the other providers of rental assistance in the area, and we found that Greater Hudson Promise Neighborhoods, they are already executing a small scale rental assistance program to their families. And they would be able to disperse this money to families in need for emergency rental assistance along the same guidelines as Hudson Roots, but with 0 admin cost. So all $9,000 would go directly to families, no admin, no other salaries or anything. So it just basically goes straight to families following the same guidelines. So they're already serving residents of Hudson who are meeting the guidelines of Hudson Roots, which is below the 80% AMI. And they would be able to disperse those funds, because we know that a lot of families are still in need of rental assistance now. So what I'm looking for from the board is a vote to authorize that. So it'd be giving the remaining $9,000 to Greater Hudson Promise Neighborhood to disperse for emergency rental assistance to families. So yeah, I'm just looking for that. And then, yeah, the last piece is at the end of today, we'll be discussing the the Hudson Housing Trust Fund board members.
So the topic at hand is the Greater Hudson Promise Neighborhoods offer that Michelle has brought up. What is the board saying?
Michelle, what other agencies were looked at? I mean, I know Columbia Opportunities also does rental assistance. So what other agencies were looked at?
So the ADLN team, so like Michael Comedius and I and some others had talked with Columbia Opportunities and Catholic Charities and then St. Catherine's, and no one else was doing a rental assistance program that was similar to Hudson Roots, in that it wasn't, Hudson Roots is meant to be lower barrier to entry and serving people who weren't already receiving other funds, and then also the no admin element. So
the $9,000 people in need.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So the $9,000 for no admin is going to go directly to people with need?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That was my question. Was there any other agencies involved? And who was part of the ADLN team, or the team that you were talking about? What were the names?
So that was the mayor, Councilman, Alderman Calvin Lewis, Rebecca Wolf, Michael Comedius, Dan Kent, Sarah Black, Louisa Flores. And correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah.
Louisa Berg, and Maria McGrath. Actually, I was not a formal
you're not. Okay.
research consultant.
Okay, so nobody on this board was part of that team.
The mayor.
And Rebecca, when she was an alderperson, was on.
Yeah, this is the team that wrote the grant.
Oh, okay.
So would anyone like to make a motion?
I will make that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Does anyone have any further questions or discussion about giving, about redistributing these grant monies to Greater Hudson Promise neighborhoods? Okay, then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? I feel some of our board members are on mute, so I can neither confirm nor deny your votes because you didn't vote yay or nay.
I voted aye. Did you hear me?
No, I didn't, but so Ravonda and the mayor and Teresa have voted to approve, so that moves it.
I'm here, Sarah, and just still not up to speed yet from last week, so sorry.
That's okay, Ryan. I know you had
It's been a rough couple of weeks.
Okay, then I think you have your approval, Michelle, to redirect those grant monies to Promise.
Well, thank you. So yeah, that's it for me for old business.
Great. So now we can move on to the HHA update.
Yes, hello, everyone. I am here with the same deal, the same plan. I have been blessed to have Nick join us today to speak on the needs of why we need these properties for replacement housing. As you all know, or maybe not know, we have a serious asbestos issue. We have a serious infestation issue. It is very unsafe and healthy for the tenants that is there now. Like I said, I have Nick here, and I'm also blessed that we have Teresa on the board, which has worked in the past at the Hudson Housing Authority, so she knows the conditions of that place as well. But first, I just would like to turn it over to Nick so he can speak a little deeper on these situations.
Thanks, Ravonda, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so I guess following up on what Ravonda has said, as you all know, I'm only serving in an interim capacity as the director, but I've been there a little over 4 months now, and I can absolutely confirm what Ravonda is saying is that Bliss Towers and the low rise are definitely in bad shape. And there have been several iterations at attempts to do overhauls, both independently through developers or as a part of our RAD conversion. But unfortunately, up until this point, none of those have been successful in tackling a large scale remodel or working on the systematic issues with the buildings. And so part of what I've been trying to do is to pick up some of the pieces that may have been dropped in the past and start to prepare to get back into compliance with our RAD conversion look at potential funding sources, and work with the board, who we're lucky are all very involved and seem to have the tenants' best interests at heart, and to put together a new plan for the buildings and for the housing authority. And that's going to take a little bit of time, but we're in the process of it. And as you may or may not be aware, one of the major obstacles to a large scale overhaul of the building, or the buildings, is relocation. Because we're not talking about changing a few things, going in to individual apartments. We're talking about either complete gut and renovation of buildings, tear down of buildings has been mentioned. And when we talk about that, we're talking about hundreds of people's living situations, which is a really serious thing. And so before you start to even think about any of these projects, you need to have a relocation plan in order, so that people aren't displaced either temporarily or permanently from their community. So one of the things that has come up several times at our board meetings, discussions with lawyers, is that if we are going to move forward with any large scale remodeling, rehabbing of the buildings, we will need to put relocation plans into place. And to do that, we'll need to maximize our properties and any other potential properties nearby. So I haven't been able to come to any of these meetings so far, but Ravonda has been updating me. We have discussed it several times with the board. And so I definitely want to reiterate the position that from HHA's perspective, we are definitely interested in looking at any properties that HCDPA or the city has that could be a part of a redevelopment, and trying to put together a proposal to purchase or whatever the terms might be, acquiring those properties. That is a little bit difficult for us at this time, given the fact that we are in this kind of in-between state with executive directors. I'm trying as hard as I can to not make big long-term decisions as I'm serving as an interim. But I do think that it would be it would make it difficult if we were trying to do a redevelopment in the future, and key properties that were available recently had been sold to a developer of a private entity, excluding them from a possible redevelopment for HHA. So whether we can purchase them outright or whether we can assure that the properties that are of the highest value and potential to the housing authority are kept open for us to buy in the future, I would definitely like to have those conversations and collaborate as much as possible so that we can obviously help you out with your financial situation, assure that the properties that are could be used for a potential redevelopment for us are available, and that we can kind of work together on this moving into the future. So that's my quick take on it from what I've understood. I'd be interested to talk more about specifics or hear about what the latest thoughts are or answer any questions.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for being able to be here. I will not express enough how much HHA means to me, and the fact that we do have these properties here that we can inquire. I really want the board to focus straight on that. We are able to end a housing crisis. We are able to relocate people, and we are able to start fresh. That's pretty much the update you have from HHA.
our next order of business is to discuss our properties for sale. So we can be sort of rolling these together here. If people have questions for Nick and Ravonda or want to describe their thoughts on the matter.
Well, I think before we move anything forward, we have to discuss, the attorney situation, because we're not going to move anything forward without attorney, on board, making sure we're doing it according to ABO and according to regulations. So before anything gets done, the next step is to find an attorney.
That's true. We do need to find another attorney. We have a few leads, and in our new business, we have a agenda item to talk more about that if we need to.
So like I said, we can't make any action, obviously, but the information is definitely welcome, but we can't move forward without any movement with an attorney. So
I'm okay to table this for right now as well.
So am I,
Is
Go
this a
ahead.
motion on the floor?
no, there's not a motion.
Okay.
Nick and Ravonda provided an update from HHA and characterized the ongoing conversation about purchasing properties from HCDPA. And our next agenda item is to talk about the HCD properties for sale. So if we can ask questions directly of Nick and Ravonda, but I'm hearing from Dominic and Kamal that we can't make any formal decisions at this meeting.
I mean, given the financial constraints, I think we need to have an idea of what one property that we would sell to keep us kind of afloat. I mean, we also have to be able to afford an attorney.
I've spoken to an attorney who had quoted us a retainer for property disposition that is within the budget of what operating funds we still have. And it's in fact less than the retainer that we would have paid for Kate by $1,000. So we might even save some money there. But I am wondering if the board has made progress in thinking through this idea that we will need to sell a property and which property that might be. We sent out some materials after the last meeting to describing the properties and with the goal to identify a strategy at this meeting, which we can do without legal counsel, or at least work towards.
can we reach out to Habitat to see if they're still interested in the property they were originally were interested in a couple years ago?
I believe that was the one on the corner of 2nd and Columbia. We can, but that, again, that's a strategy we have to decide to pursue. Nick's raised his hand.
Yeah, what I would just say offhand for my initial look at the properties you owned in the list and the material that you had, properties that are directly adjacent to HHA properties, like the one at the corner of Columbia and 2nd that was of interest to Habitat for a while, and some of the other properties on State Street, west of Second are by far the ones that are most appealing to us as potential components of a redevelopment for HHA. And what I can just elaborate a little bit on is the idea, so that folks can understand what we're thinking of or what we might be thinking of down the road, is, I think, a model that one developer proposed as a previous iteration of a redevelopment plan was thinking about doing a complete remodel of or a complete overhaul of the high rise in a situation where you wouldn't take it down completely. You would want to relocate all the residents of the low rise, which I think at this point would be a little over 50 residents. And then you would move forward with basically trying to construct a large enough structure on the footprint of the low rise that could relocate the entire high rise. And at least one developer thought that was a possibility. So then once you do that, then you relocate the entire every tenant from the high rise, and then you have access to that entire building to go through every system, remove all the asbestos, all the lead paint, deal with all of the roofing and siding issues, and in a certain number of years, be ready to move all of those units back in. And so to do that, we would want to maximize every property around us, and look at what kind of smaller structures, or maybe even infill housing we could do. So for example, that property at the corner of Second and Columbia would be of great value to us in that process. And when I looked at that list, properties that were, at least from HHA's perspective, of little or no interest, I should have pulled it up, but I could say one off the top of my head was the property at the corner. I think it's actually three properties maybe at the corner of Warren and Front Street, which from my perspective as an outsider, well, I'll say from my perspective as the interim director of HHA, is not of interest to us, but I would imagine it would be a valuable property that that folks might be interested if that was a property you were willing to part with or didn't have any other reason to hang on to. That's just my initial take at the list and looking at them, and I would be happy at another juncture to really go through the list. And Ravonda and I were actually speaking about that today, sitting down with you all, and we could go property by property and look at the ones of interest and the ones that could be liquidated sooner, that wouldn't affect our plans at all, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I don't think we need to force a decision today, especially if we have it in the budget already for another attorney. This gives us more time to look things over, unless there's other board members that would like to see some sort of decision today. If not, then I'll make a motion to table this.
I will
Yes.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. That's great. Thanks for the information, Nick, and we can table this discussion. So now we're moving on to new business, and the first order is the audit review, and we have Matthew Vanderbeck and Nicole Overbaugh here to go over our audit with us.
Thanks, Sarah. Would you like me to put the financials on the screen, or how would you like to do that?
That would be great. I don't have a plan for how this section should go.
Okay, well, if you want to just share, make it so we can.
Oh, sure, yes.
I can put them up. I have it ready.
You are now a co-host. I'll make both of you a co-host.
Okay, so let me just. Share. Bear with me. Please. Okay. Good.
Mhm.
Okay, so Nicole and I are going to go through the audit. So we finished the audit for December of 2021. And we're happy to report that, we're in a position where you should be able to file things on time this year. The date that you have to file your Paris report is by March 31st. The way the process works, we'll go through the documents that we have tonight with you now. And then the Paris report, Sarah, that you have to file, we typically take a look at that and make sure that the information you're filing is consistent with this audit. So we'll take a look at that before you send it in. So that's just the completion of the procedures. But at this point, we're ready to kind of finish up. So on the screen is the financial statements first. I'm just going to flip through and just kind of talk about a couple of different things here. So in our report, you'll see it's an it's a qualified report. The one item for those of you who've been on the calls these last few times with me is we still have the one accounting item, which is a deferred inflow of resources that is just something that's out there until it gets resolved. Really just having backup for the balance, which we've talked about before. I think management has done what they can to find out what the balance is. I'll point it out to you in a minute. But that's the only exception we have. The report indicates that you're complying with the accounting standards. And it's just a lot of language here that goes through management's responsibilities and us as auditors, our responsibilities. It's a 3-page report. The other item of significance is, as of this point in time, we still have the going concern uncertainty paragraph here. What it's notifying the readers to is in note 8, we talk about your current financial position. We look at your cash flow from an operation standpoint, and you have the significant grant that you were just awarded, but you still have expenses you have to incur related to the grant. So that doesn't necessarily help you out necessarily for your net equity, net asset position. But you also have those properties that have value that have been marked to fair value. So you have the opportunity to convert those to cash in the future. But from an accounting standpoint, we at least have to tell the reader that you have some uncertainty related to your cash flows, at least at the present time. And I'll go through that footnote a little bit later.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, so was the grant taken in as part of our income or money
Yes.
to be used? Well,
So,
it's not, is it, Sarah? The grant is not part of our money.
It's like, it's considered a kind of income, but it's restricted. I mean, I don't know what the proper accounting term is, but because it moves through our accounts, it just
yeah,
has.
You guys knew about that, right?
yeah, it's your award. You ultimately have an agreement to carry out to administer the grant. And as a result, as you incur expenses, you also record revenue for the amount of the grants that you're going to be reimbursed. So in a minute, you're going to see that you have income revenue and you have expenses that are different than what you've had in the past recent years, given the size of this grant. And actually, I'll just show that to you right now while we're on the topic. If you look here on this page, you have a grant expenses here of $300,000. And then you have grant revenue of $306,000.
Oh.
So what happens is they kind of net, because as you bill them, as you incur the cost, you're able to bill them. The way the grant is worded, it's more of a cost reimbursable type. I mean, you have to provide them with proof of your expenditures. You have certain requirements that you have to carry out in accordance with the grant and the budget and so forth. So as you incur those costs, you have the ability to accrue and record revenue. They also pay you over, as you bill them, you're getting the payments periodically as you process the bills. What we're looking at is that you're mirroring up the amounts that were paid against what you've incurred. And if you're in a situation where you've received more than what you've incurred, you'd be in a position where you'd have money that's being deferred because you can't recognize it as income yet.
I'm confused about, so I was trying to understand the deferred inflow issue, and I'm trying to think about what that number would be. So
that's different.
So it's not a reimbursement arrangement. It's that they disperse us money that we then justify with, we like show our receipts at the end of the term.
Right, but that in effect is, that's just so yes, they're advancing you the money.
See.
But that's just a mechanism to provide that the funding to you in that way. I mean, you still ultimately have to incur the costs to be able to keep the money.
Yeah, that's right.
So because you have that, there's two ways it can be done. One, you could submit the expenses first and then they pay you. And then the other way is the way you have it, where they advance the money and you apply your expenses to the payment. So that's how it's recorded. That's the revenue recognition for that. So even though you have a $1 million grant, you're only reflecting the amount that you've incurred through the end of December of 2021. And that will carry forward now into 2022, and you'll continue to pick up revenue and expenses for the grant. If you exceed the grant, you know, if you get to that point, then you'll just have expenses, but you have the revenue. It's a matching process. Okay, the deferred inflow item that I was talking about is this $112,000 on this page. This is the balance sheet. This is an item that's just carried forward from the past. That's the one that we haven't been able to get backup for over, you know, these last few years. That's what I was referring to.
Oh, so it's not, I thought I saw earlier in the report that the deferred inflow was something in the neighborhood, was about that $6,000 difference between expenses.
It's two things. It's the I think it's the 105, which is the amount from the prior. That's the one that's not supportable. And Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong. The 6,000 is the amount of money that you've received in excess of your expenses for the grant.
I see.
So it's two pieces.
It would seem that that $6,000 is something that I could, but there should be plenty documenting that difference, the $6,000.
Well, that's not what I'm referring to. It's the one that carries forward from last year. The amount that you have this year is fully supportable.
Okay.
Right. And Matt, we don't actually have anything sitting in the deferred inflow balance related to the grant this year. We just have a pass adjustment for the difference between the revenue and the expense.
Oh,
So
we
this-
didn't. Oh, we passed on it. We didn't record it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So the reason I'm thinking of it, we have two things we could do. One, if we find a difference, we can ask you to record it. In some cases, it's not significant, so we just pass on it. So we don't ask you to record it. So I was confused. I thought we had you record it. So Nicole's telling me that we just passed on it. So that difference we just left. We didn't record it.
And that's that 6,000 because
Yes.
it's all summed up in the invoices that we have. And then the 105 balloon loan to Galvin that we don't have paperwork for on hand. That's the issue. And so that's the
Yes.
primary source of our qualified opinion
Yep.
last year and this year.
Last year, the year before, and this year, until that gets resolved, we just don't have I don't know. I still don't know how it came to be. So it has a correlation to another number, the loan, but it's just, I don't have anything to tell me why it was recorded that way.
Is it, if I were to, I mean, I imagine somebody's tried this before, but
Yeah.
if between now and the end of the month, and because we lost our legal counsel, there was talk about, I mean, the board hasn't discussed this yet, but I heard the idea suggested that we ask the ABO for a small extension, just to find somebody to help us look over this independently. I don't know if you know if that's possible, but I'm trying to think if it seems like Brandon must have tried to look for the documentation for this loan. I just wonder if it's about, if I can go give it one more shot in the basement of City Hall and see if I can find the minutes where this was arranged. I have some documentation, but.
Well, I'd love for you to do that because I really don't want to have this as an exception, but I mean, from a timing, I mean, you'll choose obviously what you're going to want to do, but the fact that typically they don't like to give extensions, they'll just have you as
late.
Not late, but this also was in there the last 2 years. So even from my perspective, if you could resolve it this year would be great. And not to hold off issuing the statements because it just delays things and doesn't get it filed on time.
Okay.
Because I don't think the ABO is doesn't matter necessarily. They'd rather have it filed than not.
So the qualified opinion will be the same as last year. There's not.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same as last year and the year before.
Okay.
It's very isolated to this one number. So I really think you gotta, and there's been a lot of effort to try to find. I mean, at least I've been told, because we've had several meetings in the last couple of years on this. So I've been told that there's been a lot that's been tried. So I'd love to see it get resolved, but I'm not sure how long it's going to take you to do so. But so when we look at the rest of the statements though, there's really, when you look at your balance sheet, it's really comprised of cash of 67,179, and you have an outstanding loan receivable, which we'll go through the footnotes. And then this year, you made an adjustment to increase the value of the properties that you're holding as investments. So that's $715,000 is with the fair value based on the appraisals that you provided us of the properties. So you have $892,000 in total assets. This year, because of the grant, you did have some expenses that related to 2021 that were paid in 2022 that ended up being recorded. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. But you got to make sure that you have the cutoff of matching revenues and expenses. So that's the payables that you had at the end of the year. And your net position is $737,000, which is primarily made up of the property value. That's your balance sheet. So then when you look at your operations, the key here is that if you look at your expenses of $324,000 exceed your typical program revenue activities, that's where I was saying from a going concern perspective, you're not able to fund your expenses in full, at least at the present time. There's a little bit of a shortfall. That the only reason you have such a large increase in net assets this year is because we trued up your property values by $375,000. If you take that out of there, you have a loss. So that's important when you look at this, that the value and your equity is all tied up in those properties. Then this next page just shows you from a cash flow perspective, your cash increased by $26,000. So from a cash flow perspective, you actually have higher amount of cash, but again, you have accounts payable that's outstanding that you would turn around and would have to pay, that would then wipe out that increase in cash. So I'm just gonna, those are the numbers. I just wanna flip a couple little things here. Give me a second. It really, All these notes are carry forward from last year for the most part. All the policies are the same. We just, hopefully this doesn't make you dizzy, but I keep going through here. They have the properties held as investment, just indicating how we value those. The fair value hierarchy is just indicating some additional disclosure on how the properties are valued based on an appraisal, which is described. Here are your loans that are outstanding that are in receivables. Housing Resources of Columbia County being that $105,000 due upon the property sale or February 1st, 2031. That's also an asset to the organization. Here is the deferred inflow that Sarah was referring to, and we were talking about. This is where we don't have the backup for this. We have enough where we have property locations assigned to it. We don't know what the backup is to say why you have not recognized that as revenue yet. And here's the going concern footnote that talks about the fact that you have a going concern uncertainty risk, but you also are taking steps to address that through the growth in the organization and also the ability to sell some of these properties as needed. And that creates cash. And we talk a little bit about the grant here in the related party transactions with the city of Hudson. And this was a new disclosure added this year for fair value of measurements. And this is just saying 99% of your revenue comes from that one grant. And it's just a concentration it's considered, as you all know. Now, on a control perspective, so when we do the audit, this report here is required for a entity that has to comply with the government auditing standards. We have a few control matters. Now, the control matters that we have, I will explain why they're here in a minute. But we had two that we would consider a material weakness, one that's considered a significant deficiency. Now, ultimately, the goal is not to have any of those, obviously. We don't want to have control issues. They do come up from time to time. But in this case, the first one is until you find out the support for that one item on your balance sheet, that's a material weakness because you have no support for it. That's the deferred inflow. The second item is more, we talked, with Sarah and just trying to coordinate at year ends. I mean, given this, and Sarah was very proactive in reaching out to us about the grant and talking about the closing procedures. So we appreciate that. That's what we had asked to be done. The only issue is sometimes when you haven't had to deal with this before, there are invoices or sometimes things come in a little bit later in the process. You just have to remember that they have to get pushed back into the period they pertain to. So going forward, you'll know now to make sure that you do that because that could end up in an adjustment that is significant. And because we had an adjustment related to this that we identified during the audit, it's considered a controlled deficiency because the idea is for the organization to be able to pick that up without our help. When I say help, we can discuss it when it comes up, but we can't really identify it and ask you to correct it. Segregation of duties is just given the size of the organization and the fact that you have a lot that goes through Sarah's office. I would be remiss not to put this in here because I'm not saying that you haven't thought about it. And I'm not saying that you have limited resources. That is true. However, under the accounting rules, we can't really go by we have to treat you like any other organization, whether you could have one person or you could have 100. We have to look at you the same way as far as you should have a certain level of controls in place. You have some that I think are good, but given the size of the organization, this, especially with the $1 million grant, you need to take a look at this and potentially implement some additional oversight controls. So that's what this last comment is. So out of everything that I've said so far with the financials and so forth, I mean, the most important thing I would say to address is to take a look at this comment in particular and make sure Sarah has the help that she needs to make sure there's some checks and balances over processing of transactions. I think that was it for the financial statements. And then, does anyone have any other questions for the group? Okay, this other letter is a required communication letter, which indicates how the audit went. I mean, we thought the audit went well. I mean, it's probably been,
Comparatively.
well, comparatively, but still for the size of the organization and reaching out to us, I think we were able to, what we saw is what we expected to see. I think for the most part, we knew with the new revenue coming in, there'd be some questions around that. We read the agreements, we did all that. You reached out to us. We had to cut off expenses. We kind of knew that was going to happen. We tried to do our best to try to capture it, or have you capture it, but we kind of knew that was going to potentially happen the first year. So we had, and then with the transition with you coming on board, sometimes the audit adjustments from last year, they really should be taken care of at the end of the audit. Sometimes they don't. So we had to post that to get it trued up to last year's audit. So we have some entries here that we had to make to kind of to get the books and records in order for what we needed for the audit. The other thing I wanted to point out here is we have to identify significant risks. That's a requirement under the auditing standards this year. It's new. So these are things that we identified that we had to look at, and some of them resulted in some of our control findings, primarily with management override. Management override is something that could happen if you don't have the proper segregation duties, because you could have someone make a decision on something without it being caught that would circumvent the regular procedures that you would have. So these were the items we had identified that we addressed in the audit. And
could you elaborate a little bit on the effects and potential effects? One employee is responsible for maintaining the agency's general ledger.
yes, well, the key is that if you're going to have someone working with the general ledger, making adjustments because they have the access to the general ledger to try to make corrections or to fix things, to record things, and the person has the ability to write checks or reconcile the bank accounts and transfer funds. And even though you may set restrictions, I think you have a $5,000 restriction, I think might be for, so even if you set a $5,000 policy, somebody's got to be checking to see that you're following the policy.
Mhm.
So you can't set a policy and assume that everyone remembers to do it, especially when there's times when you got to get a check written. Without proper segregation, you could have the potential for misappropriation of assets and something that would be not recorded correctly.
Mistakes not caught, yeah.
Yeah, and generally you're going to want to have someone, when you have the limitation to the number of people in the accounting function, you got to find someone who you feel, whether they're on the board or on a finance committee or audit committee or something, they may have to, if they have the time and have the acumen for it, they need to go ahead and maybe be part of the checks periodically. When you have a meeting, maybe it's quarterly, it doesn't have to be every month, just to have someone go through and just say, okay, Sarah, let me have the bank let me see the bank statements, or they get access to the bank statements online so they can just kind of peek in there, check on things. There's different things you can do, and we can help you decide on what you want to do. If you want to, we have experience, as far as what the best practices are. But that's basically what we're talking about.
So
That's what we were trying to do, right, Sarah, in a sense?
I was about to say, I feel like the one solution, well, Teresa and I are now doing the bank reconciliations together. Teresa's the treasurer,
Yeah.
newly appointed treasurer.
Okay, great.
I totally understand mistakes that just, because it's really mistakes that just go uncaught.
Oh, yeah.
One person is doing it.
Yeah, and it makes, even if I was, Sarah in this instance. I still would want somebody to look and check, because that, then there's, something does happen, then it's like, well, everyone's on the same page. If there's a mistake, then at least they would have a chance to catch it, as opposed to not catching it.
That's how we accidentally paid for another agency's audit last year, because no one could check.
Exactly. That's how you could do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So somebody would say, wait a minute here, why are you doing this? Right. But if you could, Teresa, just make sure that you can sign off on, like, if you're doing it, it's nice for us to see, because we have to do a walkthrough and see that you say you're doing it. We need to see evidence that you are. So if you initial, or, you have emails sometimes that you ask questions about things, that's all good stuff to keep for documentation, to show that you weren't just, just saying everything's okay and not really looking at it. It's good to see some evidence that you've asked questions, things like that.
Okay.
I bet Teresa's going to be great at that.
We're gonna work on that, and we may have to get back with you guys.
Yeah, we can easily give you some pointers of what we've seen that won't be so time consuming, because we know that's part of the issue is people are volunteering their time, and there's, got to make sure you're using that time properly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. So I think that's all we had, unless there were any other questions. And we
Matthew,
Go ahead.
I thought maybe you might have been trying to show us something else, but it didn't function in the share screen. You were talking about adjustments you had to make about interest and stuff. We hadn't looked at that.
These are the adjustments here. Maybe it didn't.
Oh yeah, I think you got to switch windows that you're sharing.
What am I showing you?
Well, we're just saying the significant deficiency in internal control, but I don't know if that is.
Oh, you're still seeing
Still
the.
showing the financial statements, Matt.
Oh, okay. I thought if I did that, it would map. Okay, hold on a second. Sorry. I thought you saw what I saw. Okay, hold on. It's different now?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't realize it did it that way. Okay, so this is that letter I was referring to. That's not the audit letter, but a letter to the board. In this section, we indicate if we have any uncorrected or corrected misstatements. Okay. Uncorrected misstatements would be things we identified that we didn't have you book. That's that $6,600 that we talked about earlier that relates to the grant. You had revenue in excess of the expenses to the extent that we felt you had to defer this to later. That was the 6,600.
Mm-hmm.
The entries that you posted were the payables for 42,000 that you didn't have recorded initially. And then we had to true up the prior year balance of net assets, which is 113,000. That happens from time to time if during the audit, like this year, when we finish the audit, we should be giving you the adjustments. You should go in, make sure that they're posted and they match the audit. That was not done last year, excuse me. So therefore, the first thing we do is make sure you post them from last year, catch you up. And $113, even though it's not much money, that is a point where you received money on the loan, but you didn't allocate any of the payment to the interest. So that's just saying a portion of it should go to interest income. Even though it's $113, it's on here because we want you to fix or make sure in the future that you do that. That's all. And that was what I was referring to.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
What's
So that, go ahead.
What's the disagreement with management? What does that mean? Put that up.
There isn't any.
There weren't any, but that's just says if we disagreed with the accounting for something, or we couldn't come to an agreement. I don't know if I've ever had a client ever to say that we haven't been able to resolve it. But that's just something under our template. You're required to tell you as those charged with governance that we had no disagreements. If we did, we would let you know what they were.
So Matt, so in
Yes.
terms of submitting this by the 31st, is there a penalty if it's late?
I'm not aware of any penalty.
Our
So,
audit
I
was
mean-
late last year.
It's
I don't
been
know.
late the last several, it's been late the last few years, I believe. I mean, Nicole, do you remember, was it late prior to us as well?
I don't remember prior to us, but it has been late the last couple of years. I think last year was May, and the year prior to that was even later.
Right.
Well, last year there was an extension, I think, right, till May 31st?
Yeah.
Well, my concern is because initially, we were waiting on a lot of this information and we did a special date today, for, the attorney to input. And again, without being an attorney and the voluntary of where we are financially right now, is it prudent for us to, get the attorney's, vision on this also? Nothing against you guys, but I'm saying,
No,
when I took the ABO, and training and, there's a lot of fiducia, I don't, and just with all the stuff going on financially, would it be prudent?
well, I mean, I think that would, yeah, that's up to you guys to decide overall, because it's not just the financial statements, it's the Paris report, it's the policies, it's the way you've documented the approvals. Like, I haven't heard anybody say, have you approved the financial statements yet? I'm assuming you're gonna do that. Generally, the attorney or whoever's orchestrating the protocol and the documentation in your minutes would be there to help guide that. The attorney, though, from my perspective, doesn't, the ones I do, they're not, I'm pretty sure they're not going through and reading these financial statements and opining on anything with the financials. They're doing more process. So, I mean, you filed these last year, the year before. I don't remember the attorney, what their involvement was in that. I'm just saying that I'd prefer that you try to get this done and move on sooner than letting it linger and now going into another year when we're finally getting on schedule. The fact that we're having this meeting today is a big improvement from what I've seen so far.
They didn't have an attorney last year, right? Or the year before, did they?
I don't think we've had general counsel for a while now,
Never.
but I don't know.
So maybe with general counsel, we can straighten this out to a point where it, will be good for 2022 and on.
So it seems like the process is that at some point the board has to vote to accept the audit report and then package it with the Paris annual report.
Well, yeah, I mean, for those, well, typically the board will approve the financials, they'll approve the policies. There's certain things that you have to do to submit with the Paris report that the board would approve. I don't think they necessarily approve the Paris, but they review it. I'm just thinking of my best practices with other public authorities that I work with. But I mean, what I would do is have the attorney just initially say, okay, here's, I mean, this is, I'm sure, what you're gonna do. Here's what we have lacked. Here's what we have not done. We're in this position right now. And what's your advice as far as, should we go ahead and file it or not? I mean, you have to the 31st, if that's what your plan is, to engage an attorney.
And then we could call a special meeting to approve it, you mean?
You could, if I would say at least get some advice from the attorney as to what the risks are, or what his advice or her advice may be, to submit it by the end of the month.
Yeah, I just feel a little comfortable with another, especially, the climate that we're in, right now financially.
Mhm.
So that's just my 2 cents. It's probably worth a penny.
Yeah, so we would just wait until you tell us when you're ready, and then we would just do our subsequent events and a rep letter, and then we'll issue them when, but we do want to read the Paris report before you file it.
Okay. I can probably have
Anything
that
else?
for you next week.
Okay, well then that concludes our presentation.
Thank you, guys. I've heard from a couple of you now that we might need a special meeting in order to review our audit again and have and look over the Paris report too. I suppose we would do that at that time. Is that a thing? Do we want to go ahead and say that that's what we want to schedule? Does anyone have any, does anyone not want to schedule a special meeting?
Let's go on ahead and schedule it.
Okay. I'm going to send out a web scheduler so that we don't have a million emails floating around, but I'll send out a scheduling tool to help us find a time.
Great.
Okay. Okay. So that concludes our audit review. And the next order of business is our Hudson Housing Fund board discussion, which
I'm gonna leave. Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you, Matthew.
Bye-bye.
Which Michelle is going to lead us through.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so just to recap real quick, for the Hudson Housing Fund, this is going to be a new board of trustees who will be using our data collected from our office and community outreach to make decisions on how to allocate the funds of the Housing Trust Fund within the parameters set by enterprise. So we have 2 members serving as virtue of their office. So that would be the Common Council President, Tom, and then the HHA Executive Director, which is Nick, as interim director. And then the other positions would be nominated. So I've spoken with well over 30 people, probably over 40 people, trying to talk to people and about the board and advertising and sending around the letter of interest. And we have received 4 letters of interest and people who are interested in serving on the board. So those 4 I have shared with you. And then I guess, Sarah, what do you think is the best procedure? Do we vote one by one on having them nominate everybody?
Michelle, is there a way, is there a timetable? Because I would love to have a presentation for them in April. To the board.
So the timetable is that we need to have, it's a little bit of a crunch.
This is pressing.
Say that again.
I said this is like it's a pressing issue with us accessing the rest of the funds. And seeing that we didn't have a huge response, me personally, I wouldn't want to prolong this.
Right, but I think if I'm voting on someone, I would love to have a conversation or hear their thoughts. And there are some great candidates, and I think that because of the time frame, I don't think we should just because of that time frame, which is not members of this board's fault, that we should have some kind of process of vetting and asking questions and giving a feel for the nomination.
I mean, the time frame isn't anyone's fault. It's just.
I'm not saying it's fault, but I'm saying as a board member, I'm going to vote on someone that I maybe don't even know, in terms of a conversation. And this is a big step for us. Again, it's just me, or the rest of the board has, the weight. I just, again, this is just my, my thought, because, April, we could do the visitation and do the vote right then, or have a special meeting early April to have the vote and done. but I just think collectively as a board, we should have an opportunity to hear from the candidates.
We never, I mean, to me, that sounds like that's not like a procedure that was laid out in the beginning. The application process was the letter of interest. So that's the only thought I have about the now additional layer of like an interview or something. I'm not sure that, that's how we sold how we communicated to the people that we did outreach to, but Michelle, do we have is Enterprise Clear, is waiting even possible if we still want to receive the funds?
The thing is that this has to be like completely set up by June. And so in order to if you work backwards, we have to have the bylaws written and everything, and we have to do board training. And so I would say that if you want to do interviews, I would ask the board to not wait until the next April meeting, but to schedule a special meeting next week or the following week. Or if we can't find a time for everything, maybe allow me to do recorded video interviews or something and share them with you. That would be my ask. I think, I understand where Dominic's saying that he's taking this vote seriously, and I appreciate that, Dominic. But then maybe we can just find a more compressed timetable.
I'd rather do another meeting if we already have a special meeting coming up. I mean, that's just me though. I mean, the table's open for other thoughts from other board members.
I didn't hear you, Mayor. I didn't hear what you said.
Same issue.
I said I'd rather not have another special meeting since we already have one that we're gonna have to schedule. On top of the low turnout and the quality people that actually are showing interest, I think we should move forward.
I agree with the mayor.
Well, can I vote? I mean, should I say this? Two of the people I recommended, can I vote for them?
Yeah.
I can still vote for them?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two of them that you have there were my recommendations, so.
Yeah, and that's everybody's recommendations. Yeah.
Ryan, I think he's having trouble. Just wanted to make sure. I don't know if you have any thoughts congealed about this yet.
No thoughts.
So Teresa, are you in favor of having a vote today?
To be very clear, I kind of like what Dominic is saying, that it doesn't, and I have to be honest, it doesn't seem like we're the ones giving the approval, but we're not the ones being involved. Like and I shouldn't go back, but like the job, the graphic designer, what's that for? Who is it? What? So, I know I recommended two people, so I know who I'm going to vote for. All right, so it's okay with me if you want to vote for them today, but because I recommended two of them. And how many do you need? Two, right?
Well, we'll need three because we want odd numbers. We have two, so a 5-person board. I mean, we could technically proceed with 3-person board, but I think 5 would be much better.
But I do, we're being given things to do, but it seems like it's a disconnect, but we're the ones given the approval. And, I have to say it because that's the way I'm seeing it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if that's, I know you're coming from. I think there's some poor timing in the sense that this had to happen at the same time that you guys were just coming into the new board.
We just being slapped on the table here, vote for this. You had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little crunched too. You
Mhm.
know, I mean, we're new board members, and I have to say it because that's the way I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And my fear is that, I mean, personally, I don't know if I can do an honest vote. I mean, I'll probably abstain just because of the lack of information, not because of the quality of the candidate. So, I don't know. I don't want that to be a factor in holding anything up either. So,
Mhm.
again, I get it, but do we schedule a special meeting? Times are, you know, time tough all the way around, but a special meeting is a special meeting for a purpose. And the purpose is to get something done through a process that, to me, I would be personally more comfortable with. But again, that's just, my thought.
Michelle, didn't everyone get resumes and bios?
We asked them for a letter of interest. And so they wrote that, and I've had like a phone interview with everyone, or like a long email exchange, or I've talked to everyone about their interests and their qualifications.
In other words, I got copies of their application.
Mm,
Yeah, and it was intentional. We wanted it to be open to people of different backgrounds,
Mhm.
and valuing not just academic professional experiences and fancy resumes, but people who have the lived experience of Hudson residents, and being, voices for people who are, trying not to be displaced. So that's kind of why we went this slightly more informal route. So that we could, value people's experiences and voices that might not shine through in a formal resume.
I do think Michelle has quite an extensive experience to recruit people to the board. So I don't want it to seem as if or for the record, to indicate that there hasn't already been a significant search and process.
Don't take things personal. That's not fair. You
Oh, I
know? No, I'm just saying that because Dominic is asking.
Oh, yeah, no, I appreciate, the questions, and
Don't say.
appreciate that you guys are taking this seriously.
Nothing to do with your ability. Nothing.
No, thanks, Teresa. I understand.
If we're going to delay the vote, I think we need to have a specific idea about what will satisfy, what do you need to see? So we're saying a special meeting that that the people will attend and be interviewed in a public meeting, or what are the things that you need specifically to move forward?
I would be fine with that in terms of, interviewing, given, the presentation. Because, again, I'm not doing anything, against, Michelle, your efforts. It's just, I'm voting on something, and I've done interviews before and seen spectacular resumes, but the interview didn't go well. And if someone, is really serious about being on the board, having a presentation, probably is not going to be an issue for them, because that shows their commitment to be part of a board.
A presentation?
Well, just kind of bring them, the four candidates in, so we can kind of ask them questions and kind of, get a feel for, their thoughts and different things. And it's just, again, I like to have a snapshot of something rather than paper.
Can I just jump in here? I feel like for us to have a special meeting would kind of be bizarre, because we just heard Teresa say she recommended 2 out of 3 of the people.
2 out of 4. Yeah.
So
yeah.
We know which way Teresa's going, right?
Am
So
I
like,
the-
I just feel like this is, the special meeting is unnecessary. I feel like we're able to vote on this now because Teresa's ready, right? She's ready to vote on who she recommended.
What I'm
Right?
saying
Teresa's
is
ready.
that this,
I'm
let me
ready.
make this clear.
The
I
mayor is ready.
recommended 2 out of the 4. So I know which way I'm going to go for 2. but I have no idea which way I'm gonna go for the other ones. And you said you need 3, right?
Yeah,
I'm not voting for all 4 of them, right?
I mean, we could, and we can find another, you know,
Another board member say is that, well, I would like to see a presentation from them so I can get a better visual of who I would like, you know, of how
I
they.
mean, that seems like a lot of work for a person who, this is volunteer. I mean, no one from the planning board has to do a presentation to join the board. No one from, you know, any of these other boards have to do a full presentation.
Okay.
And
That's,
then what would they be presenting on? I'm not sure, like, what would we be asking them to present on?
I really think that we need to just vote on this tonight and move forward.
Dominic?
I'm
I
thinking,
mean, whatever the board wants to do, but again, like I said, you know, I've already expressed my thoughts, but okay.
it does sound non-standard to have like candidate interviews. Like, I don't recall, for people I know who served on the tourism board, that wasn't a requirement. And
Yeah,
it's not a
I
procedure
know,
that we set up beforehand when we went about recruiting people. So that is my.
And there's council members that are, you know, present in this meeting right now and on the board who have approved, you know, different members of the public to various boards in the city without a presentation.
It seems like we're split with Kamal and Ravonda wanting to take the vote tonight. Teresa knowing how she would like to vote on at least 2 of the candidates. And I know that Ryan is dealing with some other stuff. So I'm not sure if he's with us or can express an opinion.
So you want to call a motion? To vote tonight or to wait? Is it a motion?
I can't make a motion.
I can't either. Who makes the motions in this?
You can indeed make a motion.
You can make the motion?
You
Okay.
can, you could make a motion to table this or to vote on it tonight.
Okay, I make a motion whether we should vote on it tonight or table it until next.
You gotta make
It's one or the other.
It is-
Yeah.
We gotta make one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, make your motion.
I make a motion to vote on this tonight.
I second that.
Okay, I'm in favor.
I,
in favor of voting on it tonight. Teresa said aye,
Mhm.
and the mayor said aye. And
Hi,
oh, and Ryan says aye. Okay.
I'm here. I'm just in a lot of pain, guys. I'm sorry.
Thanks for being here, Ryan.
Yep.
So Dominic, I think the board's carrying to vote on this tonight.
Okay, I get it.
So should we go one by one?
Yes.
okay.
Michelle, do you want to show the letters of interest or something as we vote, or? You
I
want
can
to-
do that. I can have, I mean, if the board's read them and they remember, then I don't want to waste people's time, but if you would like me to pull them up, I can do that.
I would like to hold up.
Hold up, okay.
Yes, please.
Let me make you a co-host.
Okay. Okay, and you can all see my screen?
Mhm.
Okay, so our first candidate is Angelique Innamorato. She is one of our housing justice fellows. So she's been going through housing justice organizing training. She has lived in a tenant of affordable housing. And her letter says that, do you want me to read all of these? Do you want me to summarize them? What, do you want to read them for yourselves? What would you like?
Go ahead, continue.
Maybe just something, no.
Okay, so she's writing this letter because she wants to be a part of putting in the Housing Trust Fund. She lived in Hudson for over 10 years. She's for the people of Hudson, what's best for the community. She's also a follower in HCDPA, become an organizer. So she's in the process of learning about grant writing, equitable economic development, and many more, including affordable housing development. She advocates for seniors and people with disabilities. She has children with disabilities. She's a current resident of low-income housing and an advocate for the voices for people who can't advocate for themselves. Should we take a vote on Angelique? Any questions? I've spoken with her several times.
Can I say, don't just read it to us and then let everybody think.
Okay.
Okay, because how do we do? Hello, how do we do this?
I thought you wanted us to take a minute to think. I think someone needs to make a motion to approve or to formally nominate Angelique to be on the board of the Housing Trust Fund.
Oh, okay.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second. So I think the mayor nominated and then
Ravana seconding the nomination. And then can we hear votes in favor?
Aye.
I,
Any votes opposed?
No,
Ryan voted no.
no, I vote aye. No
Oh.
opposed. Hold on, I'm trying to get back there. Mayor, did you make the first and then Ravana, you seconded?
Correct.
Thank you. I'm just trying to keep up on the minutes as we go.
Best minute taker we've had. Thank you. So that means that the vote carries to nominate Angelique to the Housing Trust Fund Board.
Okay. Second person is Usha Berlin. She says she's lived in Hudson for over 30 years. She's watched our city grow and change. She has experience running a business. She's volunteered at the Boys and Girls Club in Hudson, teaching sewing and crafts. She knows many people she's known Hudson were forced to leave either because of large rent increases or the owner of the house was making a change to Airbnbs, and many of these changes are final. So moving forward, she'd like to be a part of making our city better. And I've spoken to her on the phone, and she's definitely a big advocate, especially for seniors and affordable senior housing, or helping seniors be able to stay in their housing.
Make a motion, Usha Berlin.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
Wait a minute, you forgot to ask if any abstained because you forgot to ask before.
I did. That's not something I've known to do. So let's,
Yeah, for the first one, did anybody abstain? Dominic, did you abstain?
No, I voted yes. Actually, I don't know if you heard me.
no. We haven't been taking a roll call vote, but
Okay.
okay.
You know who vote, who said yes, who abstained?
Everybody voted yes.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like you voted yes for both.
And how many you need? 3? Oh, we're getting there. Okay.
So let's move in. So we've nominated Usha to be on the board of the Housing Trust Fund.
Okay, who's next?
Next, we have Dustin Duncan. He is an epidemiologist. He works with social and spatial epidemiology. He is a Columbia professor, and he is his work is, I'll try and, this is him speaking. He recognizes the broader societal and structural forces that underlie each patient's acute presentation. is necessary delivering true and effective patient-centered care. So this core belief is central to his interdisciplinary research. He focuses on minority health, intersectionality, and health disparities, and he has authored 2 books and over 200 publications. So he's done research on neighborhood and neighborhood health and things like neighborhood characteristics like crime and housing conditions like housing instability and how they're predictors of health, including the ongoing COVID pandemic. So this research in the field of spatial epidemiology is summarized in his first book, Neighborhoods and Health, and his forthcoming book, The Social Epidemiology of the COVID-19 Pandemic. So his passion is for fostering healthy housing and neighborhood conditions.
Wow. Wow.
I'll nominate.
So I'll make a motion to nominate.
I think Ryan beat you to it.
Beat you
Oh,
to
sorry,
that.
sorry.
Beat you to that one. Sorry.
I was second.
So Ryan, motion,
Yeah.
Mayor seconds, all in favor?
I,
I,
Aye.
Any opposed? And
so
no,
we don't have to go any further.
well, I think we should, because we've considered the first 3, we should go ahead and consider the last one.
You said you only needed 3.
Yeah, but I mean, 3 is like the bare minimum. So if one person doesn't show up to the meeting, then there's not a quorum.
Yeah. And
Okay,
also this is just a random order of people's bios on this document. So I think it'd be fair.
okay.
In
Ooh,
progress.
This,
This is more of Dustin's
well, that's more.
lengthy work
Did
he's
somebody
done.
tell him he only needed 1 page?
Yes. So then finally we have Rebecca Wolf. She said she'd be honored to serve on the funding board. She's been active working in several areas of housing need, access, and development since her time as an alderperson in 2020. She was instrumental in the city's application to the Enterprise Anti-Displacement Learning Grant, which made this possible. As minority leader, she held seats on the IDA and HCDPA, and in those boards, she prioritized the housing needs of low-income residents and the delivery of community benefits. She's been a member of the Hudson Housing Authority Board since 2019, and she's formed relations with many community members in all those different areas. And she'd hope to bring good governance to the housing fund.
I will nominate Rebecca Wolf.
I'll second her. I think she deserves it. She did a lot of work to get everything everything to this point.
You are not kidding, Ryan. That is the truth.
I,
Teresa votes yes. Any other
Aye.
in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And is anyone abstaining? All right. We've
Yeah,
done.
board.
Yay.
Let's give a clap for Michelle because I know she worked really hard to.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you all.
Great work, Michelle. And thank you to all our volunteers who are very diverse and qualified group.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Congrats on bringing that.
Dominic has his hand up.
Oh, Dominic's clapping, I think.
No, I was clapping. I finally learned how to do it, so thank you.
So it was okay. All right, good. I'm glad you're satisfied. What am I glad for? It's not my board.
Good work, everyone. And do we need anything else before we move on from this, Michelle? Okay. So the last order of new business is about legal counsel, finding new legal counsel. I don't have anything prepared for this section, but want to take suggestions, hear people's thoughts on pursuing new legal counsel. I have spoken to some person that to one firm that I spoke with in October during our first search with Kate, a man named John Vaginellis, and he said that he is not able to help us do something like review our audit, but he is available to help us with the property disposition with a signed retainer and an agreement of $2,500, which is $1,000 less than what Kate was going to charge us for the retainer. So, but
Sure,
that was for general.
At one time, Victoria was willing. Is that an option?
Certainly is, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Victoria, she's for the planning board. She's great.
Do you know if she's interested in representing, in serving as the legal counsel for the general counsel for HCDPA, or would she just help us with this property disposition and with the audit?
We could give you her information. Is it going to be you contacting her or the mayor?
It would be me.
Okay, so I guess we'll have to give you her information.
Yeah, maybe Dominic, can you share that with me over email? Or
I think Teresa has it. I just remember from a meeting that at one point she was interested in the past.
okay,
Thank you, because I did say she was on the planning board.
that's right.
Yeah, so Teresa might have that information.
Thank you.
Okay. So I will share that information with you and, you know, is it okay? Do we have the money to pay her?
We do.
Wonderful. Yeah. And it's good. We're using a lawyer that's already involved.
Yeah, I think for things, as per the procurement policy that I showed you all, the standards are not onerous in terms of finding someone. We just have to show that we considered a few people, and we have, and even in the case of an emergency, which I think this is, we don't have to really even, we can just choose someone that we think is prudent. So I can certainly reach out to Victoria if she's already.
Yeah, I'll text it to you. I'll send it to you through email and you'll know. And I'll CC her on it, let her know. Okay.
Okay, does anyone else want to say anything? Then it's
Public comment.
now it's, yeah, we can open the floor for public comment. Do any of the members of the public want to make a comment?
If there's no public comment, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I will second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you all for that meeting.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.